Hello once again and welcome to the Prince Magnum channel where hot rodding and romance do coexist. I'm your host Prince Magnum. Welcome once again to Do-It-Yourself Budget Hot Rodding and the video where we talk about doing Project Spirit's front disc brake conversion. The parts numbers that you see rolling on by are the parts that we used on Project Spirit, okay? And let me say right now, if you plan to do the same setup, get these part numbers. Even if you don't plan to use AutoZone or O'Reilly's, these part numbers will be a big help to you, because if you don't get those part numbers, then you're going to be trying to figure it out once you go in to do your setup. You're going to be searching for it. Just save those guys a lot of headaches. Get the part numbers even if you're not going to be using them, because they can cross-reference those numbers anywhere else besides O'Reilly's or AutoZone. Now the only thing that you can't get from those places or most other parts stores are those parts right there: the spindles, brake caliper brackets, and splash guards. You got to get those through Mustang Unlimited. Okay, onward and upward. First thing that we got to talk about is some of the challenges doing this swap outside. We were at the mercy of the weather, and notice that I said mercy. We were constantly dealing with the weather just not cooperating with us. Temperature dropped, it rained, we had to work under a tarp, it got very cold. On top of that, T-Bone ended up suffering an ankle injury, so the work was slowed down. On top of that, one of the other challenges was most everyone that I ever talked to usually took the stuff off of a Maverick that they salvaged from a junkyard and put it on a Mustang. It wasn't usually the other way around, so we were kind of in new territory. As a matter of fact, when I called Mustang Unlimited, they're like, "You're really doing this to them? And, wow, this is going to be awesome." They got really excited because this meant that their parts are being used for something else just besides a Mustang or a Mercury Cougar. In the challenge, we ended up finding that certain things for the Maverick worked and certain things could only be for the Mustang, okay, when you're doing your parts. For example, you could use the rotor and wheel bearings for the Maverick. That worked out just fine. But then we found that the calipers, the brake pads, that had to be specifically for the Mustang. Things like that. We found that out very quickly. Now, when we were putting the new rotor on, we found out that for the splash guard, there was actually a piece that we didn't actually end up needing that came with the kit for the Maverick rotor. It wouldn't allow it to seat right, so we ended up not using it. But I will suggest getting some rolled up cork. Mustang Unlimited offers like this, almost like a foam gasket. We didn't use that. We cut one from cork, from rolled up cork, and that actually works out just fine as a seal, which you'll see that later on in the video. Now, a few safety tips that I will suggest, especially if you're doing this outside. Number one, when you're taking the old drum setup off, be careful of those springs. They'll fly off, hit you, the guy holding the camera, or your project. So be careful of those springs. Another thing to take into mind, okay, brace your project up. Don't just use jack stands, because we ended up having a situation that I'm going to actually have to replace some parts on. When we went to separate the upper and lower ball joints, we had to use an extra jack. And the jack that was used to try to help separate the top, even using the ball joint splitter, we ended up, it's having to use a jack. Well, it slipped off the jack, destroyed the lower ball joint, and it destroyed the outer tie rod end. Just split the boots. They're not holding grease, so we're just going to have to replace those parts. I've got a few of those parts already. Not a big deal, but save yourself some headaches and, just be careful, okay? Also expect rusty bolts, okay? They're not going to want to cooperate on these old cars. Even cars that have got 10 years on them will have rust. And if it's a used car, like most of your older ones are anyways, you're going to find that someone's been under there monkeying with them, and you might have rounded nuts. We didn't find too much of that on Project Spirit, thankfully, but it was rusty bolts. But you'll find rusty rounded bolts, so be expecting to use a lot of WD-40, knocker looser, whatever penetrating oil you prefer. Just expect to use a lot of it when you're dealing with these front ends like this, okay? Just rusty bolts, just the way it is, okay? So do yourself a favor, take your time, and do it right, okay? I can't stress that enough, okay? Take your time. If you're doing it yourself, you don't have to worry about, it's your project. Take your time. Okay. Another issue that we ran into is the brake lines. The rubber brake lines going from Maverick to Mustang. Use that part number up there. We thought we were going to be using the ones for the Maverick, and it just became a nightmare. And in the end, we ended up having to go to a banjo fitting for the brake line. That part number up there will work. Pretty much with, you might have to make one or two small adaptations going from the steel line to the rubber line, but that's it, okay? We did the footwork for you. Alright, now in this clip right now, you're starting to see it really come together, okay? It's bright and shiny, it looks pretty. Don't worry, it won't stay that way. That's just the nature of a daily driver. But you can really see it coming together. Again, take your time, okay? Make sure everything's right. We've typically found that in most every situation, everything bolted up with no questions to Project Spirit, to that Maverick setup. In most cases, again, utilize the part numbers that I've got available. Save you a lot of headaches down the road. Right here in this clip, you're starting to kind of see what I was talking about, how we started to use one setup. You will not be able to reuse the rubber brake lines for the drum brakes. You're not going to be able to reuse those. They won't hold up to the pressure to take, they're not going to be able to withstand the pressure that it takes to use disc brakes. So change those out, okay? And use the part numbers that I show. Now, when it comes to wheel bearings, pack those suckers full. Pack them full of grease. Basically, I'm going to tell you, use 3 times more than you think you're going to need. Make sure grease is coming out of every orifice, okay? The last thing you want is your wheel bearings to seize up, because it'll pull your whole brake setup along with your tire and wheel from the spindle, and basically it'll look like something right out of a cartoon. Basically, you're still going straight, but your tire and brake setup for that side of the car is going the other way. And then right quickly after that, you're going to have one of the most horrible accidents you could ever see. Don't do that to yourself, don't do that to your passengers, and don't do that to your project. Make sure you pack those full of grease, and pack them with the right grease, okay? Again, and even put them on the spindles when you go to put everything on. Put them, and once it's in there, pack some more in there. Pack it inside the dang rotor. Make sure that you've got plenty on the races. I mean, just pack that sucker full, because the last thing you want is a horrible accident, okay? And I even took a few minutes to show you how tedious it is to pack wheel bearings, but believe me, in the end, it was well worth the time, okay? Because I did get to, before the flywheel broke and the starter went out, I did get to enjoy Project Spirit driving her for about a week before that whole mishap. And let me tell you, which we'll talk a little bit more about as the video progresses. Believe me when I say she stops on a dime and handles like a dream, okay? We'll talk a little bit more about how she did as the video progresses. But for right now, I will just say, top-notch work, top-notch parts, top-notch work. This was the best setup that money could have bought, okay, in my opinion. And we'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Again, spend a lot of time in this area. And that's why this clip is actually a little long, is because I wanted to emphasize the importance of it, okay? I can't stress this enough. I actually made the mistake one time, long time ago, with one vehicle. I used the wrong type of wheel bearing. Well, I used the wrong type of grease on doing wheel bearings. Ended up having to replace the spindles, and it's not like spindles for cars are, you can just go in and buy them. They'll tell you it's a non-wear item, then you got to go to a junkyard and hope they've got them. So take your time and do this job right, okay? Can't stress that enough. All right. Now, when it comes into the fitting, you could just see how this setup really came together. It looks just like the 70 to 73 Mustang setup. But it's on a Maverick. This setup, believe it or not, will stop the 429 Cobra jet, which is one of the reasons why that I went to it. Not because I'm going to a 429 Cobra jet, but it allows me for a lot of room. So if I do decide to go to a more powerful V8 than using an inline 6, or I decide to really hop up an inline 6, and yes, you can do that. This setup will stop it within reason, and it is fully upgradable. Already, you can see it starting to come together, and you could also see that setup that we started to use, but then we were like, no. And thanks to a friend of ours at Deloge AutoZone, he was able to hook us up with that right brake line, so you won't see the nightmare that we really had to deal with when doing this setup. When it came time for the master cylinder, this is where I really shine. You could see the old one on the right side. That's for, believe it or not, drum brakes. Okay, they look almost identical. However, the one that's to the left, that is for disc brakes. Okay, let me say right now, the pressures are different. The last thing you want is not enough pressure getting to your new shiny disc brakes, especially if you're going to be running a lot more power. So do yourself a favor and get that set up. Make sure that you have everything, so make sure you have that whole setup. The arms and everything, it bolted right into place. I didn't have any guesswork. When it all came together, there you go. I know a lot of guys typically, do red. We decided to do for blue. I've got a ton of that stuff, and it's high-temp VHT paint. It would have been better if we had powder coated, but hey, no big deal. Okay. Again, you could really see, once it all came into place, and once the brakes were bled, she stops on a dime, folks. I can't stress this enough. Project Spirit stops great, as you've seen in the opening clip. She stops on a dime. Like I said, I got to enjoy her for a little while before her flywheel broke and the starter went out all at the same time. Let me say, Project Spirit, she handles like a brand new car with this setup. And at the same time, anywhere where there might be a little bit of slop in her suspension, now I can feel it. Before, I had that hub wearing out, so it wasn't quite as tight up front as it should be. I couldn't feel what was wrong. So now, with this new setup, ironically enough, I can now feel those things. I know where to begin to fix those things, because just because it looks okay doesn't mean it is. And you'll find that out very typically with these old cars. Just because it feels like it, just because it looks okay, and it, that sort of thing, it may still need to be replaced, and you'll be able to feel it 100 times better just by upgrading some of those things that, going from a setup like from the old drums that we had to what we've got now. Okay? So again, yeah, this was an expensive project to do on Project Spirit. Was it worth it? Yes, it was. How much did we spend? Right around $850. Now, the prices may vary depending on where you live, but again, it's well worth it. And the entire system is completely upgradable. The system is also the brake system. The brakes themselves are actually bigger than what you'll find on the Mavericks and the Comets. So, all in all, this is the better setup that I found, and it all started with I just needed to replace the front drum brakes. Again, I didn't mind the front drums. I would have kept them kept her that way. But the way people drive today, as you can see in this clip, just cruising her down the road, driving the speed limit. People drive like maniacs here in Missouri. As of last time I checked, Missouri is number 10 out of 50 states for the worst drivers in the U.S. So this setup makes not only Project Spirit safer, but it also makes other people safe, because now I don't have to, worry if the next time someone pulls out in front of me, if that brake fade is going to cause me to rip right through their vehicle and kill a family of however many. Okay, and that was always in the back of my head because of the way people drive today. Okay, so believe me when I say this setup is upgradable, but even if I don't upgrade it, when I start pushing, either her old rebuild her old 6-cylinder for more power, or I decide to go to a more powerful V8, this setup will work just fine. It'll cover me for a good distance. Okay, I mean, again, it was designed to stop a big block, 429 Cobra jet. It'll stop Project Spirit's inline 6 just fine. Okay, and it'll stop a small block Ford just fine. Again, completely upgradable. Now, before I begin rambling, I want to give a special shout out to a friend of mine here on YouTube, the gentleman who runs BST4 channel. Him and I, he's also doing a Maverick at the same time, and as we were talking, kind of back and forth, and you'll see it in the comments section on one of his videos, I was describing what I did to Project Spirit, when he was doing his front disc brake setup. He wanted to see this one because he's like, he really enjoyed what he was doing to his, but then when he heard what I was doing, he's like, maybe I might, he wants to take what I've learned and maybe apply it to his in various ways, and so I really had to push this video as quickly through as possible. We are going to be doing a more commentary version at a later date for this. We're going to bring T-Bone in, and him and I will probably sit on a microphone and talk at great length about what we experienced, including some very laughable stuff in that in that whole ordeal of working on changing over Project Spirit's front disc brakes. But this video really is a huge shout out to my boy on BST4 channel. Buddy, I hope this helps you, because he really wanted to see what this was like when it was all said and done with. Alright, as usual, follow me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. Since there's no Twitter face, you don't need to worry about it. Be sure to check out my Patreon account, Magnum_Prince at patreon.com, and donate if you can. If you want to become a monthly subscriber, $1 a month, and you become a member of the Prince Magnum channel's High Mileage Club. and all the money that you donate to the Prince Magnum channel will go back into helping Project Spirit and Project Lena. Projects, things that we'll be doing to them. Regardless, it's just that if you're able to donate, it's going to happen a lot quicker and a lot faster. If you don't have anything to donate, hey, at least you coming on and subscribing to the Prince Magnum channel and hitting that bell icon and watching every video that you possibly can and telling all your friends about us, that's just as much of a help as anything. All right, as usual, get out there and work on a project. I don't care what it is. Just do something with yourself. Remember, idle hands and a creative mind make horrible bedfellows. If you have a sweetheart, sweep them off their feet. Do something special for them today. You might take them down the road in your classic car. You never know. Something to be said about cruising still. And as always, for all of you out there, it doesn't matter what's going on in your life. If no one out there has told you that they love you, Prince Magnum does. God bless you, and have a happy 24. Thank you.
You done messed up, Aaron. Now take your ass on down to Oshag Hennessy's office right now and tell him exactly what you did. Get out of my goddamn classroom before I break my foot off in your ass. Insubordinate and churlish.